All right, so good afternoon, everyone. This is lecture number 31 for IC 242 Continuum Mechanics. And today we'll be talking about a new stress tensor, which is called Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor. In fact, we have two of these. And then after defining Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor, of the momentum equation. Okay, so the motivation behind this is to actually derive the material form of the momentum equation. Now, just to clarify, so Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensors are a new concept, different from what we have learned about the Cauchy stress tensor, sigma ij. So sigma ij is not the only stress tensor that's available to us. That is what we learn today. So before we actually start, let's quickly recall as to how we derived and obtained the Cauchy stress tensor sigma ij and what is the meaning of sigma ij, which will help us derive from first principles the Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensors. Okay, so the first few minutes are simply a recall of what we have done in the past. All right. So if what we have done in the past, we defined sigma ji, that is the j comma ith component of the stress tensor or the second order stress tensor sigma, the Cauchy stress tensor. This was defined as Ti superscript ej. So what this means is the Ti, if you remember, is the stress vector or the traction. So we said that the 9 components of sigma or simply are nothing but the traction vector, the stress vectors on 3 perpendicular planes. So let's quickly draw that. It's very important that we are able to recall this properly, otherwise the next session on Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor will not be clear. So we had point P, and for this point P, what we did was we defined 3 perpendicular planes. Okay, there seems to be a lot of lag between what I'm writing and what you're seeing. So I'd have to go a bit slow. So at this point P, we have 3 perpendicular planes. So one plane is in the direction of E1 hat, one plane is in the direction of E2 hat, and one plane is in the direction of E3 hat. So I'm writing the 3 axis directions. Seems like whatever I'm writing is not visible. Can you see? Can anyone please confirm if you can see the? Oh, you can. Okay, so it's taking a bit of a time. Okay. So now you can see the 3 coordinate directions. So what we do is we form or we have 3 planes. So one plane is in the direction of E1 hat, which is what I've drawn. Then one plane, the green one that I'm drawing now, is in the direction of E2 hat. And then the third plane, which I'll draw using red color, is a plane which has a normal in the direction of E3 hat. All right, so I apologize for the lag. It's probably because of my internet connection, which is quite slow today. So you can see the three planes. So what we said was that the stress tensor, the 9 components are simply the three columns of the stress tensor are simply the traction vectors on these three perpendicular planes. So for the plane E1, I have a traction vector which is denoted by, so for this plane, let's say Ti E1. So that denotes the traction vector or the three components of the traction vector on the cutting plane, which has a normal in the direction of E1. So when I say a plane in the direction of E1, for this discussion, that means a plane which has a normal in the direction of E1. So direction of a plane simply means a unit normal pointing outwards from the plane. Okay, so the traction vector on plane E1, which is the blue plane, has three components which denote the components of the traction vector in three perpendicular directions, that is in the direction of E1, E2, and E3. Similarly, you have T in the E2 plane, which is the green one, and then we have a traction vector in the E3 plane, which is the red one. So these three traction vectors, which make up a total of 9 components, 3 each for each traction vector, this constitutes our Cauchy stress tensor. Okay, so that's what you can see from the definition of Cauchy stress tensor here. So sigma ji is simply Ti Ej. So if you put j equal to 1, you get sigma 1I. That's the first column of sigma that denotes a traction vector. The three components of traction vector in the E1 direction for the plane E1 and so forth. So forth. Right. So what we basically see is that the elements of sigma are nothing but the traction vectors. Now, why did we have this sigma? So so the information about the traction vectors on three mutually perpendicular planes in the coordinate directions, it helps us find the traction vector on any arbitrary cutting plane passing through P. So for that, we had the relation that the traction vector for any arbitrary cutting plane which has a direction that's in the direction of n hat can be written as sigma ji nj, or in terms of the traction vector, it's Ti Ej nj. So the whole reason, the whole idea of having this sigma or the three mutually perpendicular traction vectors, the traction vectors on three mutually perpendicular planes. The reason to obtain that was to be able to find the traction on any arbitrary cutting normal, any arbitrary cutting plane. Okay. Okay. So in this case, let's also clarify that the n hat, that's the normal to the arbitrary cutting plane. So let's draw the arbitrary cutting plane as so this we call n hat, and the corresponding cutting plane is something like this. So the black plane that I've drawn is just a plane. Let's draw the normal more clearly. Okay, so that's my normal n hat. So to be able to find the traction vector on this arbitrary plane, the black plane, we have to obtain the information about the traction vectors on the blue, green, and red planes, respectively. All right. So it must be clarified here that n hat, which is a normal to the arbitrary cutting plane, is defined in the Eulerian coordinate system. Okay, so we have two coordinate systems here. I apologize for this change of pen thickness. We will go back to the previous pen later. So n hat is defined in the Eulerian coordinate system. So what that means is, if you remember when we talked about the Lagrangian and Eulerian coordinates, what we said was that we can have a Lagrangian coordinate system, which is the coordinate system in most cases defined for t equal to 0. So every particle can be traced back to where it was at t equal to 0. And we can define a coordinate system to track those particles in the reference coordinates. And that coordinate system has three mutually perpendicular axes, which may or may not coincide with the room coordinates that we have defined for defining the current coordinate system. Okay, so at any time we can have a room coordinate system, that is a coordinate system which is fixed to the room, which we also call the Eulerian coordinate system, and those the ij, so the e1, e2, and e3 directions for the Eulerian coordinate system may be different from capital I1, capital I2, and capital I3 coordinates, which were defined for the Lagrangian or the material coordinate system. So n hat is defined in the room coordinates or the Eulerian coordinate system. So what that means is I write my n hat as a linear combination of the components of n written in the unit vectors along the Eulerian coordinates. Similarly, our traction vector is also written as a linear combination of the components of traction vector in the Eulerian unit axis. So any vector, we have to define the basis for that. So the basis for this defining the traction vector so the components are defined in such a way so that basis is E1, E2, and E3. So that's the basis we have here. Okay, so it's a very important point here because the Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensors, which are useful for material form of the momentum equation, they are defined on the Lagrangian coordinate system. So we will see that, but it's important to understand this idea that n hat and t both are written in such a way so that their components are defined for the bases which are defined for the Eulerian coordinate system. All right, so that was the recall. So let's start with today's discussion now. All right. So we will now define a stress vector Okay, so this stress vector is slightly different from the one that we had defined earlier. So this stress vector is defined on surfaces with their normals in the material coordinate system. So let me write that first and then I'll draw a figure to explain. Okay, so let's read this definition of a new stress vector. So we are defining a stress vector, okay, not a tensor, it's a stress vector. Now, if you remember that stress vector that we had defined previously, which was T, it has two different characteristics, two different quantities we need to quantify that. So one is the normal on which it is defined, and the other is the three components of the stress vector. So in this case, we define the stress vector in such a way so that the normal on which that stress vector is defined is written in its material description, whereas the stress vector, the three components of the stress vector, are written in the Eulerian coordinate system. So what that means is, let us say at some time at t equal to t1, you have a surface passing through the point P that is under consideration. That surface has a unit normal n hat and has uh, a stress vector which we call P naught instead of T now. Now this P naught requires a unit normal to be defined on which this acts. So if it was defined using the Cauchy stress vector, then this would have been T superscript n hat. So that means that this is the stress vector which is acting on a unit on a plane. We call this plane has an area delta gamma and has a unit normal n hat that defines this plane. But what we do now is, so for let's say this plane delta gamma that you have, you can always map this to what the plane looked like at t equal to 0. So you go back in time. So this is at some time t equal to t1. So back in time, this plane would have looked something like this, which had a normal written as capital N hat. Okay, so what we do is we map each and every particle that constitutes this delta gamma and trace them back to where they were at t equal to 0. So this is t equal to 0 in the reference configuration. And we find that this plane had a normal which is capital N hat, which corresponds to small n hat at current configuration. Okay. This is back in time. So what we do now is we simply define the stress vector in such a way, we call this P naught, and the superscript is capital N hat. So instead of defining the normals in the current configuration, we trace them back to what they looked like, what the normal looked like in the reference configuration, and we use that capital N hat to characterize the stress vector. Okay, you will see why we have done this, but right now we simply need to understand that this is what it means. It's a small p, not a capital P. Okay, P naught superscript n hat. So write it more clearly. All right. So this P naught stress vector superscript n hat right? So P naught super n hat is the stress vector on an area delta gamma naught. So in the reference configuration, the area is delta gamma naught. So P naught n hat is a stress vector on an area delta gamma naught. It's in the plane which has a unit normal n hat. Now you can write n hat in terms of its three components, NA, IA hat. So IA hats are, so I1 hat, I2 hat, and I3 hat are the are the coordinate axes in the Lagrangian coordinate system. Okay. But remember that the forces are still the same. It's how we define the stress vector. So let's define the stress vector. So remember previously we had defined the limit that our delta gamma tends to 0. The force acting at point P on that plane divided by the area was given as dF by d gamma, which was defined as the traction vector acting on T at hat. Okay. So now we will write the limit delta gamma not tending to 0. So remember that now we're talking about the area defined in the Lagrangian coordinate system, and the ratio of delta f, the force is still the same, but the denominator now is delta gamma naught instead of delta gamma. So this becomes df by d gamma naught, which we define as p naught superscript n hat. So the only change that happens is instead of delta gamma, we have a delta gamma naught. So it's the only difference is representation. I mean, physically it's the same force vector, except that it is defined differently. But the three components, if you put the numbers in the components, they'll still look the same. Okay, so here delta F is the force acting on the surface, which in the reference configuration was delta gamma naught. Okay, so it's still this surface that we're talking about, the one I've circled in red. Hopefully you should see it soon. Yes, so it's this red surface that we are considering, but we write things in such a way so that we write things in terms of delta gamma naught, which is the one on the bottom right of this. All right. Now that we have defined P naught cap superscript n hat, we will write the linear momentum equation now. Now, the linear momentum equation was the time rate change or the material derivative of the linear momentum is equal to the net external force acting on the body or on some sub volume of the body, okay, whatever we are considering. So d by dt of some sub volume or the whole body omega. So this omega is arbitrary, not choice. Rho times d omega, that's the small mass that we're integrating over, and then the velocity of the element that we're considering. Okay, so that's the time rate change of momentum, and this is equal to the total force acting on the body, which is a sum of the body forces and the surface forces. So we write the body forces first. The body forces is rho times d omega, which is again small mass times bi. Bi denotes the body force per unit mass here. And the other term is the surface forces acting on the bounding surface gamma of the volume omega. And this is simply an integral over. So dFi is the small amount of surface force acting on a surface element d gamma. So earlier we had written this dFi as the product of traction vector t and d gamma, but we are not doing that right now. And we are just keeping it dFi. Okay. So what we can do now is, since we are trying to write the equations in the material form, so we will transform everything to the material or the reference coordinate system. So what that means is, so this rho that I've written earlier, let's clarify. So rho is a function of small x in t, vi is a function of small x in t, bi is a function of small x in t. So they're all Eulerian descriptions. But now when we transform when we transform the observation into material coordinates, what we end up getting is description in the form of material coordinate system. So you can write your rho as a function of small x, which can be written as a function of capital X in t, and then comma t. So this gives us a new function, rho tilde, which is a function of capital X in t. Okay, so this is similar to what we have done in the past. Similarly, we have a corresponding function for vi, which is a function of capital X in t. So you simply have to substitute small x as a function of capital X in t into the functional form, and you get these tilde functions. And they're different because the function will look different. Okay, so bi as a function of bi tilde as a function of capital X in t. Okay, so that is what we do here. So we get rho tilde. And this d omega now can be written as j times d omega naught based on what we have learned earlier. Okay, so a volume in the current configuration is the Jacobian times the volume in the reference configuration. Now similarly the right hand side, and this integral is over omega naught now. Okay, so the right hand side now can be written again in terms of, I won't write rho tilde bi tilde j times d omega naught plus integral over gamma naught now, and this dfi, as we just defined in the previous slide, this dfi can be written as p naught n hat vector times d gamma naught. So let's go back and see that. So from this definition and the last equation in this slide, number 2, we can see that p naught n hat times d gamma naught is what df vector is. Right? So let's come back to the equation that we're working with. So this is what we have. So what we have done effectively is that we have transformed everything to the Lagrangian or the material coordinates, and all the integrals also are now in the material coordinates. All right. So now we can do a bit of a simplification. So now the d by dt term on the left hand side can be moved inside the integral, as we have learned earlier. Moreover, using the continuity equation, we will see that the differentiation simply goes over to the vi term. So I'll just write the expression here. So we have a rho tilde, which does not get differentiated, or the differentiation of that turns out to be 0. And then we have a differentiation over vi dot, and then we have j times d omega naught. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll combine j with rho tilde. I'll put a j here and remove it from this side. You'll see why. Put them in bracket just for convenience. And this vi dot we'll replace by acceleration ai. Or in fact, let's keep it vi dot. Let's not introduce a new symbol. So vi dot, as we know, is what acceleration is. Okay, so that's your left hand side, which was the time rate change of momentum. Now on the right hand side, we can do something similar. So the integral is over omega naught. We can combine rho tilde and j together into one term, and then we have bi tilde dy by dt. And the surface term, which was p naught n hat d gamma naught. So I'm trying to go as slow as possible so that I don't confuse you. But what we have done is we have simply moved the integrals and we have combined the terms rho tilde and j. Yes, thanks for letting me know. So velocity should have a tilde on top as well, because this velocity is also in terms of the reference or the material coordinates. Let's make sure we have done this in the past as well. Yes, so the previous slide is correct as well. Thanks for that. So let's move on. So why did I put rho tilde and j into a bracket? Because we have seen previously the material form of conservation of mass it stated that rho tilde times j is equal to rho naught. So rho naught was the density field at t equal to 0. And rho tilde is a density field at some time defined in terms of Lagrangian coordinates. So writing it more, expanding it a bit further. So rho tilde is a function of capital X and t, and j, of course, is a function of capital X, well, and t. It could be a function of time as well. And this is equal to rho naught. So that's the material form of the conservation of mass equation. Okay. So rho tilde is simply the corresponding form of rho density field written in terms of capital X. So we simply took rho and we substituted small x in terms of capital X and t, and this is what we get rho tilde. But rho naught, if we go back to the initial configuration, then the way the particles were distributed, there was some density field, and that density field is called rho naught, which is only a function of capital X because it was defined at t equal to 0. That this is the reason we combine rho tilde and j into one term so that we can replace that by rho naught. Right? So I will highlight this equation because this equation will help us derive the material form of the. So it's some way midway between getting midway to getting the final material form of the linear momentum equation. Now, before we finally derive the linear momentum equation, let's see a couple of properties of P naught. I'll call this as properties of P naught. Okay. So remember, this P naught is corresponds to the traction vector T that we had for the Cauchy stress. Now this is a stress vector defined in the material coordinates for areas n hat. Okay, so the first property of P, which I won't derive, I'll just state it. P naught n hat is equal to minus P naught minus n hat. So this basically means that if you try to find P naught for an area which is just opposite to n hat, then you get the negative of that. So this can be obtained. So let's call the boxed equation as A. So we did something similar in the past. So what we did was we have an volume omega, which corresponds to omega naught in the reference configuration. So what we do is first we apply this equation to part one only. So that's what we take as omega naught. Then we apply it to part two, and then we apply it to the whole volume, which includes part one plus part two, and then we can subtract the 1 and 2 equations from the third one, and then what we ultimately get is p naught n hat is equal to minus p naught minus n hat. So you can derive it yourself, but that's one property of p naught that we needed to discuss. The next property of p naught, it's not a property, it's how it is defined. So the p naught vector for a given coordinate axis or a given coordinate plane IA, so this is just to state that p naught is defined in the Eulerian coordinates. So the three directions of p naught vector are in the Eulerian or the room coordinate system. So even though the surfaces on which the p naught vector is defined are in the reference coordinate system, the p naught vector as it is defined in the room or the Eulerian coordinate system. The third property of P naught is, if you remember, for the traction vector earlier as well, we wanted somehow to write the traction vector for an arbitrary plane. So in this case, the arbitrary plane is capital N hat, and we can write this in terms of the P naughts defined for three coordinate planes in this way. Okay, so this is very similar to the equation T n hat was okay. So again, this can be obtained by applying equation A, which is the boxed equation in the previous slide. That's the conservation of momentum equation. So you can apply that to an infinitesimal tetrahedron centered around point P, and that will help you derive this equation. It's very similar to what we had done earlier for deriving the equation for Tn hat. Right. So now that we understand the three properties, now we will define our first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor. So instead of sigma, now we have capital P naught AI, which is equal to small p naught with a subscript I, that's the ith component of p naught, defined for a plane capital I A. So that's the definition of your stress tensor. And this is called Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor. In fact, we call it the first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor. So P naught AI is called the first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor, and that is how it is defined. So again, this is similar to sigma Ji was traction vector, ith component of that defined for a plane with normal Ej. Right. So finally, we can write our P naught n hat, the ith component of that, can now be written as capital P naught AI NA. Okay, so this is using the third property. So let's go back. So this is using this third property number C, which is P naught n hat is written as P naught capital IANA, and also the definition of the first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor. Okay, so again, it's again in parallel with what we have done earlier for Cauchy stress tensor, but now we have things instead of sigma we have P naught AI, and instead of small n we have capital N. All right, so now we'll substitute this in the equation number A that we had left earlier for the conservation of the force balance equation A. So when you substitute that, the only term that changes is the third term, the surface area term. The rest terms stay as it is. So the third term now you can see becomes capital P naught AI NA times d gamma naught. Right, so now we can apply the Gauss divergence theorem. So the first two terms remain as it is, and the third term now also gets the integral is now on the volume omega naught, and then we have P naught AI comma A d omega naught. Right, so that's using the Gauss divergence theorem. Since we had the normal NA, so we define PAI comma A. Okay, so now we can combine all the terms into one integral. So this becomes integral omega naught right. So this is equal to, this integral is equal to 0. Now remember that omega naught, the choice of omega naught was arbitrary. It was based on the choice of omega, which was arbitrary. So what this means is that since omega naught choice is arbitrary, that means that the integrand has to be identically 0 everywhere inside the body. So we can write, since choice of omega naught is arbitrary, okay, so this is the equation of motion in the material form. This is the force balance equation or the conservation of mass equation in the material form. All right. Now this is for a general case where the body is accelerating or parts of the body are accelerating. For the case of equilibrium, which is a special case, the left hand side becomes 0 because vi tilde dot is 0. There is no acceleration. Okay. So we'll take a special case. So for equilibrium, what you get is simply P naught ai comma a plus rho naught bi tilde is 0. That's for the case of equilibrium. So this was the material form of the force balance equation or the linear momentum conservation equation for equilibrium situation. All right. So the next discussion is on the moment equilibrium. That's for the situation. So we now we will consider equilibrium only instead of considering some net force or net torque acting on the body. Let's take equilibrium because the ideas can be expanded easily. So we'll now derive the moment equilibrium. So we know that if the body is under equilibrium, that means that the net force and the net torque acting on the body is 0. So for moment equilibrium, that's net torque is equal to 0. So the torque that is applied is, torque in this body is applied by the body forces and the surface forces, similar to what we have done in the past. So let's say this is the body. We have the origin outside the body, and we have, let's say this is some body force acting, and then we have a position vector x. So when we write the net torque because of surface forces, so what we get is the integral over gamma naught, the cross product between the position vector xj and the stress vector, which is p naught k n hat d gamma. So this term P naught n hat d gamma is your stress vector. So this is the cross product. So this is the torque because of the surface force, and then we integrate this torque over the complete surface. And the second term we have is the torque because of the body forces. So I've written rho naught b k tilde. I'm not writing everything and converting that to the material coordinates. I've skipped a few steps and I've straight away written the material form of the equation. And this is equal to 0 because the body is under equilibrium. Right. Now in the first term, we can replace P naught n hat, P naught k n hat with P naught a k n k. So let's write that. Well, see what was the relation. So this first equation is what we can use here. So we can replace P naught n hat with capital P naught a I n a. In this case, instead of I, we have a k. Okay, so this is what we have done. We've replaced P naught k n hat with capital P naught a k n a. Okay, that's using the property number C. All right, so now we can apply the Gauss divergence theorem. So we get this integral over omega naught. I'll combine the terms now. Epsilon ijk can be taken common. And then we have xj times P naught ak comma a plus xj rho naught bk tilde. So I've applied the Gauss divergence theorem to convert the first integral to a volume integral and then combine the two volume integrals into one term and taken epsilon common as well. I can now expand the first parentheses using the product rule. So the first term becomes xj comma a p naught ak, and the second term becomes xj times p naught ak comma a, and then we have another term which is rho naught bk tilde. So since xj is common in both, so I'll take xj common. Right, so what we can see now is this term in the parentheses, which is P naught AK comma A plus rho naught BK, that is nothing but what the equation we have on the top. Instead of K, we have an I, but K is a repeated index. So what we see here is that this term is zero because of the force equilibrium. This term is zero because of force balance. So what we are left with is only the first term, so which is the integral over omega naught epsilon ijk. So this xj comma a p naught ak. Okay, so same idea, since omega naught is arbitrary, so we can write the integrand is zero. So now you can see that this is slightly different from what we had obtained earlier in the Cauchy stress tensor form. So earlier we did not have this term xj comma a. In fact, since we were dealing with the areas also defined in the Euclidean coordinate system, so we had xj comma a, where a was, let's say, so let me write that. So this is similar but not the same. We had xj comma p. Well, let's keep it L, and then we had sigma Lk, and this was 0. So xj comma L was simply delta JL, which is your Kronecker delta, and this simplified to epsilon ijk sigma j k being equal to 0. So this simply gave us that sigma is symmetric. But in the present case, our P naught is not symmetric because we don't have epsilon ijk P naught ak P naught jk equal to 0 because xj comma a is not delta. Right? We're dealing with Eulerian and Lagrangian coordinates mixed in this case. So xj comma a actually is del xj by del capital X a, which is not 0. Which is not delta j. Let's write it properly. Okay, so P naught AK is not symmetric. So the relation we have actually is x j comma a P naught AK is equal to x k comma a P naught a j. Okay, so this is what we get from this equation. Again, it's easy to show if you put I equal. So there are three equations here: I equal to 1, I equal to 2, I equal to 3. When you expand them, and what you get is finally this general relation. Okay, so this is what we get. So what we see is that importantly that our Piola-Kirchhoff, the first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor P naught is not symmetric. It is not like Cauchy stress tensor, which was symmetric. So even for the bodies which are non-polar, it is not symmetric. So we'll write PK1 is not symmetric. So PK1 means first Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor. Yeah, but we really want something which is symmetric because as we know that for symmetric second order stress tensors, we have very nice relations for eigenvalues and eigenvectors. So we do want stress tensors which are symmetric. So what we do is we define yet another stress tensor which is called the second Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor. All right, so this is how we define the second Piola-Kirchhoff stress tensor, so that P naught AI is equal to xi comma b SBA. Okay. This is how we define it. So this is the relation between our first PK1 and PK2. So this is PK2. Okay, so let's go back and let's call this relation as B, the one in the box. So what we do is we will substitute this definition of PK2 in B. Okay, so let's see what B was. So B was xj comma a P naught ak and this was equal to x k comma a p naught a j. Right. So when we substitute this definition of p naught a in term a k in terms of sb, so let's see what we get. So we get j comma a, and then we have so we have substituted p naught a k as x k comma b s b a. On the right hand side, what we'll do is, just for clarity, since a is a repeated index, we will replace that by c. So this becomes p naught cj, and then we'll apply the definition of pk2. So this becomes xj comma d, and then s d c. So what we did was, instead of that b that we had, we use a d here, just so that we have a different, it's not necessary we could have kept it as b, but just to not confuse with the left hand side, we just have different repeated indices. So a was replaced by c, and b was replaced by d. Okay. You will see why we've done this. So now what we do is, on the right hand side, we replace c equal to b and d equal to a. Again, we can do that because c and d are dummy indices, so they can have any label you want. So we have xj comma a, k comma b, plus ba, k comma b, so a s a, right? So now what we see is, on the left hand side we have xj comma a, and we also have an xj comma a on the right hand side. We have an xk comma b on the left hand side. We also have an xk comma b on the right hand side, and then we have sba and sab. So you can pre-multiply both sides by the inverses, and finally what you get is, you get sba equals sab. So this shows that pk2 is symmetric. Okay. So there's lots of things that we have defined in this lecture, but the only idea that I want to stress here is that Cauchy stress tensor is not the only stress tensor we have. We also have pk1 and pk2, which are, and pk1 is not symmetric, but pk2 is defined in such a way so that it is symmetric. Okay. The last thing, which will be very quick to be discussed today, is to discuss the relation between pk stresses and the Cauchy stress tensor. There should be some relation, right? And there is, because they both just quantify the stress vector acting, just that they are written in such a way so that the Cauchy stress tensor is written in terms of Eulerian normals, and the pk stresses are written in terms of the Lagrangian normals. Okay. Okay, so we know that we can define dFi, which is differential force. In terms of the Cauchy stress, is sigma ji nj times d gamma. So sigma ji nj is the traction vector that, when multiplied to d gamma, gives us the small force acting on an area, d gamma. And we can also write this dFi, as we have done, in terms of p naught ai capital Na d gamma naught. Okay, so this we call 1, 2. So these two we have already discussed in today's lecture. We also need a relation between d gamma and d gamma naught. And this relation is something that we have discussed a couple of lectures ago, where we derived a clear relation between the two. So we are taking that from the previous discussion. So we know that nq times d gamma, that's the qth component of d gamma, because d gamma, if you remember, is we write that as a vector. So, or we can write d gamma times the qth component of the normal. This is xa comma q times the Jacobian times na times d gamma. Again, this has been shown earlier. You can go back and check the derivation. So if we use 1 till 3, with the third equation is 3, what we ultimately get is we get sigma ji nj. Now from the first equation, nj times d gamma can be replaced with using equation number 3, xa comma j times the Jacobian times capital Na d gamma naught, and this is equal to our p naught ai na d gamma naught. So now we see that Na times d gamma naught is the same. So what we ultimately get, I mean, you can subtract the two, and we know that Na times d gamma naught is not equal to 0 because the area is not 0, and neither is the unit normal. So what ultimately we have is P naught ai is equal to sigma ji xa comma j times Jacobian, or if we simply post multiply by the inverse of xa comma j, what we get is P naught ai small x j comma a So this is the relation, and if you want the relation between pk2, then again it's easy. So we know that pk2 is defined in such a way so that p naught ai is simply x I comma b. Then you already have xj comma a, then you have s b a. So these two equations give us the relation between pk1 and j, pk1 and sigma. And the second one gives us the relation between pk2, that is s, and sigma. So that's pretty much it that I want to discuss today. Now, very important point that I will leave for you as an exercise is that under infinitesimal deformations. Now, till now, I have not stated whether the deformations are infinitesimal or finite. Under infinitesimal deformation, our pk stresses and Cauchy stress tensor become the same. Okay, so under infinitesimal deformation, that means that when things are linear, so this is for you to attempt by yourself. Okay, so this is under linear approximation, Cauchy stress tensor and pk stresses are the same. Under finite deformations, they may not be the same. Okay, so we'll stop here today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.